Hey everybody, last week I posted that I got a new computer as an upgrade to my studio, and I said, hey, I'm going to take the opportunity to show you a little bit of the innards of the Chords of Orion studio, which is called The Dungeon. And I also asked for any questions that you might have so I can do a little bit of a Q&A, and I got some great questions. So let me snap my fingers and let's go down to the dungeon. All right, here we are in the dungeon. I'm not going to bore you with how I got down here. I just want you to know that this is a about 115 or 120-year-old basement. So there's the kind of the floor of the basement, and as you can see, where I shoot my videos, I've put a kind of a wooden raised floor there. Okay, so it's not a very big spot. So that's a 5 by 7 carpet lying on the floor, 5 feet by 7 feet. Not very big. You can see the size of my pedal board there. So it's not a big space. And you might be thinking, Bill, why don't you have a bigger space? Well, the problem is, let me face the camera here. I'll show you some other stuff later. The problem is, I have a big family. Now, I'm not 29 anymore, right? I'm not even 39 anymore. My kids are growing up, but I got a bunch of kids, and there's still kids in the house, and space is still kind of at a premium in our house. So I've had to kind of take over a corner of the basement, the Vencil basement, and that's what you're looking at here. So for those of you who don't have a lot of room, I'd like to encourage you, don't let it keep you from doing your stuff. You know, find a corner of the basement, wherever, and just work with what you got. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about what I have going on. So I already talked about the floor, and what I typically do when you see the videos of me performing or speaking, most of the time I have some kind of pedal board, whether it's this pedal train with different pedals on it, sitting on the floor. I'm using one of my guitars, so there's one of my PRS baritones there. You guys have seen that a lot on the channel. I've got a backdrop set up, and this is the recent backdrop, and you know, I've got it, it's not really expensive. I built a really cheap frame out of PVC piping. You can see it there on the left hand side, and no, I'm not showing you the rest of the messy basement. And I've got it kind of clamped to the top there. You can see how it kind of goes over. And so, you know, when you've got a camera trained on it, check that out. It looks pretty good. I'm pretty good at faking a pretty clean environment, aren't I? So, not too bad. Now, you might be asking, Bill, why do you have a raised floor? Well, I'm going to be totally honest with you. This is a 120-year-old basement, so there's the concrete floor. Fortunately, it's not a dirt floor, it's concrete. But guess what? This old house has a bit of a leaky basement. And when there's a lot of rain, I get water in from certain areas of the basement. Now, I'm saving up my money to have kind of have the basement looked at and see if I can get it into better shape. But at least at this point, this little raised flooring here, okay, let me show you here, that kind of does the trick for me. It makes sure that everything stays safe and sound. So I'm hoping within the next year or two to be able to rectify the situation and get this thing in shape. I'm never going to have a finished club basement, but it would be great to have a drier basement than I normally have. All right, so let's take a look at some other things. Here's my camera tripod right here, right? And I'm holding my main camera, which is a Canon SL2, not super expensive. And I've got a few lenses, and they're not fancy. Whoop, there's a 35 millimeter. This is a kit lens. That's the kit lens, 35 millimeter. Another kit lens. So I don't shoot on super expensive lenses. I want to save my money for the music stuff. And you can probably also see I've got camera lights here, photography lights set up, and these are all relatively inexpensive lighting that I got off of Amazon. So again, there's some of the mess. Nothing crazy, so yeah, sorry about the mess there. It's gonna be there for a couple more years until I get things really reconfigured in the basement. I lose some of the current family members. I love them to death, I really do. Yes, I really love my family members, serious. But it'll be nice when, you know, when appropriate, they're grown up and kind of go, that'll be cool. But when they go, that's when I'm going to kind of reconfigure this whole area and make it a little bit nicer. All right, so before I delve into the computer and some of the other audio stuff, let me show you one other thing. I do get a lot of questions about microphones. And, oh, there we go. This is my voice over microphone. This is an Electro Voice Cardinal, and that's what I almost always use that for my voiceovers. And it's not a super expensive microphone, at least it wasn't when I bought it. Unfortunately, there we go, sorry about that. It's no longer made, but it's a condenser mic, it's a cardioid mic, and I usually have it above the camera, you know, the framing of the camera, so you can't see it. Also, people ask me, let me turn around here. Also, people ask me about the quality of the video, and I do get a lot of comments about it. Hey, your audio sounds really good. How do you do that? How do you get rid of room sound? Well, I do have a couple of absorption panels, but really, since I live in an old house, check this out. Check that out. Oh my gosh. So in the ceiling of my basement, it's not all exposed. Some of it's kind of this El Cheapo drop ceiling that was there before we moved in. But there's this area above where I record that is exposed insulation. And no, it's cool. It doesn't drop any, you know, crazy, doesn't drop any insulation on me or anything. It's been sitting there for many, many years. But it works great to absorb reflections. And that's part of how I get the sound. Okay guys, before I look at the computer, let's look at a rack that I have next to my desk. And I've got a few goodies in there that I use pretty frequently. So first up, the top unit in the rack is my Avid 11 rack. If you've been following me here on the channel, you know that I use this 11 rack quite a bit. I have over the last 5 years, quite a bit for amp modeling. In the last 6 to 8 months, I've begun to experiment with other amp modelers such as the Boss GT1000, the Headrush pedal board, the Line 6 HX Stomp. But I'm still using this Avid 11 rack for my basic sound. It's working really well. So what else do I have going on here? Well, right beneath the 11 rack is a mic preamp. That is a Pro MPA tube preamp. It's an inexpensive, relatively speaking, it's an inexpensive 2-channel tube preamp, and I run my microphones in there. I like kind of that warm tube sound that it produces. It's pretty nice. Some of you ask me about audio interfaces, and what I'm using right now is this, and that is a Focusrite Sapphire Pro 40. And I believe, you'd have to check, but I think that Focusrite has discontinued the Sapphire line. It's a Firewire interface. So I've had this interface for 7 or 8 years. It predates the YouTube channel. I think I'm probably going to replace it within the next year or so. I will likely go with a newer Focusrite unit. I've really been pleased with Focusrite. The driver support on Mac, the quality of the signal, it's all been great for what I do. Below that, I've got a couple of power conditioners here, and these are pretty inexpensive Musician's Friend units. So you can see they're called Musician's Gear. And I can't show you now, but on the back side there are several AC outlets, and they're conditioned so they reduce hum and noise and all that good stuff. At the bottom, this is actually unplugged. I haven't had it plugged in for several years, but it's a really old Delta Lab Echotron digital delay, and it does up to a 4-second delay. It's mono. I used to use it in the band that I played in long ago, and I can't bring myself to get rid of it. It was a really cool unit. Got a lot of great use out of it. All right, over to the left of the rack is my TAC A3440. I actually have two of them, believe it or not. One's kind of put away as spares, kind of as spare parts. And this is what I use when I need to get out the occasional reel-to-reel tape. And that's typically when I'm looking at something old that I recorded many years ago. And there's a DBX noise reduction unit and a shelf full of junk below it. Yes, I am a slob. I admit it. I totally admit it. I'm a slob. All right, let's get to the computer. So this is my new computer. It's a 2019 iMac 27-inch. Let me kind of hit the switch there so you can see the screen. And it replaces a 2015 iMac. I've been Mac-based since 2014, the January actually, 2014. And the reason why I switched from Windows to Mac is strictly because of Logic Pro. I really love that program. It's worked really well. So how do I have the Mac hooked up? Well, it is plugged into, obviously, the Focusrite unit that I showed you just a moment ago. And the outputs of the Focusrite unit are plugged into these old M Audio BX8 studio monitors. Right, so there are two of them there, obviously. And underneath my desk, and I won't show you because it's kind of messy down there, I've got the matching subwoofer for those M Audio BX8s. And I've had the BX8s for, I'm going to guess, probably 13 or 14 years. So about 12, 13, 14 years ago, I made a full switch over from analog to digital recording, and so I saved up some money and got a lot of equipment at that point, and I've kind of been living off that for quite some time. I have an auxiliary interface here. That's a Focusrite 2i4, and I use that for mobile recording. I also use it for live streaming. All right, let's talk about signal path for a minute. Obviously, we're going to start with a guitar. This is, again, one of my PRS baritones, and there's a fan there. Oh my gosh, where'd that fan come from? Any old who. As you would expect, I've got a lead running from the guitar into a pedal, and that pedal is almost always my Wampler Ego compressor. If I had another compressor, it might be that, but I'm running into a compressor. From the compressor, depending on what I've got set up, I will run into some kind of distortion. And what you see set up here is the Strymon Riverside. All right, so that is kind of the front end. And from there, excuse the camera work here, I'm going to run my signal into the 11 rack. So it's probably a little hard to see here. I didn't switch the lights around, but I'm running in directly into the front end input of the Avid 11 rack. Now the 11 rack is going to provide the amp modeling capability, and I'm typically using a Fender style amp model. And then I run the effects loop, the effects send from the Avid 11 rack into my Morley little alligator volume pedal. Okay, so let's check that out again. I'm running guitar into the compressor, into some kind of distortion, into the Avid 11 rack, and then I'm taking the Avid 11 rack effects send, the mono effects send, and running that out into my Morley little alligator. From the Morley little alligator, I go into the rest of whatever I've got set up. And oops, oh my goodness, here's a sneak preview of some upcoming demos. I won't tell you what pedals they are. No, I would never tell you what they were. But anyhow, once I go through, oh, and there's another pedal, oh my. But anyhow, once I go through all the other pedals after the Morley Little Alligator, I then have a stereo pair of cables that go into the stereo effects return of the Avid 11 rack. The Avid 11 rack is plugged into my Sapphire, my Focusrite Sapphire, via a digital output, and that's one thing I love about the 11 rack. Let me show you the 11 rack again. Whoops. Sorry. Show you the 11 rack again. The 11 rack has a digital output, and the Focusrite has digital input, so I can get it out of the 11 rack into the Focusrite without doing a digital to analog conversion. It's time for some Q&A. So, as I mentioned, I got a lot of questions, a lot of great questions on Facebook and YouTube. I got so many questions on this video, I'm just going to address the Facebook questions. I'll save the YouTube questions for a later video. I will get to you all, okay? So first up is a question from Ian McNichol. Bill, for a total novice in recording music with a Windows PC, what software program would you recommend? Well, I'm not using Windows right now, but I did before 2014. I used Windows for about 10 years for digital recording, and I really liked Reaper. It's a really great package, lots of great features, and it's not very expensive. The second package that I really like for Windows is called FL Studio, and I think it's a really great option if you're interested in combining audio recording of ambient guitar with software synthesizers and sequencing. Next up is a question from ALES, and I'm not sure how to pronounce the name. I'm going to say Aless, and I apologize for that. Aless asks, what audio interface is best for beginners? There are so many great choices out there today for audio interfaces. I mean, really, there are. I could go through a lot of different brands and a lot of different models. So I'm going to stick with what I know. And what I know and really like is Focusrite. And their Scarlet line is really, really great. You get a lot of value for the money. And I already mentioned that I use a 2i4. So I would highly recommend Focusrite. I think it's a lot of value for the money. They sound great and they're very easy to use. But if you're not interested in Focusrite, there's a lot of other great options out there. Adam Mindikowski asks, hi Bill, any tips on how you record your ambient acoustic guitar pieces in the studio? I guess my question is about how you approach recording acoustics in the studio setting. Do you mic up to get some air in the recording to balance out the clean DI signal? And the short answer is yes. Whenever possible, I really do like to use real microphones. This is a pair of Russian Octava small diaphragm condenser mics, and I really like the sound of these, and I do use them to record, in particular, my Loudon and my Martin acoustic guitars. But you will see me from time to time recording with built-in guitar pickups. In particular, my Tacoma and my Taylor baritone guitars have built-in pickups. So I do make use of those too. And if I'm using the built-in pickup, I don't typically record with mics. I just plug right in and record with the pickup. All right, next up is a question from Paul or Powell, P-A-W-E-L in English. What do you think about having one high-end multi-effect unit? And Powell gives the examples of Fractal, Helix, or Kemper. instead of a large pedal board of separate units. And obviously this is in the context of playing ambient guitar. What would be the disadvantages of such a solution? All right, so that's a great question. So is it a good idea to get an all-in-one pedal board or a multi-effects unit? And I think the answer could very well be yes, it is a great idea. If the unit has the types of effects that you're looking for. If so, there's a great chance you could get that one unit and pretty much do everything you're looking for in the unit. Now, I'm a big proponent of amp modeling, but I do like to use external effect pedals. So regardless of what I'm using, I really think it's important to have a good stereo effects loop so that if I'm interested, I can plug in additional effects pedals to complement the built-in effects. All right, next up is a question from Nathan Elvis Friedman. And Nathan asks, Yo back. I'm kind of wondering about the content I'm recording. I tend to get stuck in a major/minor key, natural minor key. I have the background sound done, but I'm not sure what kind of guitar I want to put with it. I started tracking guitar the other day in jamming, and I ended up playing the same motif and vibe I usually play with this kind of stuff. So I assume it's kind of like the ambient vibe that you get. So I guess my question is, how do you have the foresight to know what kind of guitar you're going to put down? And do you ever use harmonic minor or other exotic scales? Is it still ambient if it shakes the chill, relaxed vibe with an Egyptian scale? Sorry for the long post. Well, that's a great question. So let me address the idea of scale first. Can you use different scales and modes with ambient guitar? And the answer is absolutely yes. The real answer is you can play whatever you want with ambient guitar. As a matter of fact, ambient guitars, what even is ambient guitar? I think we understand that maybe what we call ambient guitar means an ethereal kind of guitar tone with delays and reverbs, but really, if you think about ambient music, it started out back in the 19th century with Eric Satie creating what he called furniture music, and that was music that was supposed to be like a piece of furniture in a room. It just kind of sits there and you don't really notice it, but it's there all the same. And in particular with Brian Eno, you see that with his earlier albums, which are called Music for Airports, right? So Music for Airports kind of sits in the background and just provides an ambient emotion or backdrop or audio texture for an airport. I like those albums a lot. If you get a chance, check them out. They're on Spotify, Apple Music, etc. So really, you can do whatever you want with ambient guitar as long as it's kind of in the background. Now, in regards to Nathan's question about playing the same thing over and over again, I think the way to break out of that, or one way to break out of that, is to put a box around what you're doing. Like maybe, for example, one day say to yourself, I'm not going to play any minor chords. I'm only going to do things with major chords. Well, that's a restriction, and it's kind of a tough restriction, right? But it could be helpful in breaking you out of a kind of a pattern that you're stuck in. Maybe you say, I'm only going to play minor chords. Or maybe, here's a good one. Maybe say to yourself, today I'm only going to play melodies that have an interval of a perfect fourth. And there's going to be kind of weird melodies, but if you play them for an hour, whoop, that was a perfect fifth. Sorry, I broke my rule. Okay, it's kind of weird, right? But if you did that for an hour, I'll bet you would come up with some interesting ideas. All right, next up is a question from Muhammad Reza. By the way, Muhammad Reza, I know who you are on YouTube, and thank you for all the great comments and the support. I truly appreciate it. So he asks, "Hey Bill, hope you're doing well. I only have one question. Have you ever tried making synthesizer-only ambient music?" And the answer to that question is yes. Many of you, maybe most of you don't know, but some of you know that I have a second YouTube channel. I'll put a link here, but don't click yet. Listen to the rest of this video and then click. And it's called Chords of Orion Long Play, and I do multi-hour long-form music and videos. And that on that channel, about half, I would say at this point, it's half guitar and half purely synthesizer. So yes, I do synthesizer-only music too. Richard Worcester, it's not really a question, but he says, "Be sure to enjoy a cool beer with that computer upgrade project." Richard, thank you. I did. Now, not too many. I don't go overboard, but yes, I did enjoy a cool beer, and it was great. And Richard, thank you so much for all the support. I really, truly appreciate it. Next up is a comment question from James Milson. "I'm learning from your instructional videos about playing guitar." Excellent, thank you so much. "I am older." Hey, so am I. and would love to create a CD for my children, but I don't know how to do it. What equipment, software, process, a nice how to record video or series as you did with how to play ambient guitar would be great. Or helpful. You know, James, that's a great idea. And I do have a few videos called, I think it's kind of a series called Recording Ambient Guitar, but I think that's a great idea. And I will keep that in mind for a little bit later this year to start a series, How to Record Ambient Guitar. And by the way, if anybody else is interested in a series like that, let me know in the comments below, and let me know some suggestions that you might have for topics for that series. Marit says, "You look like Sir Davos of Game of Thrones," or does he look like you? Oh, my goodness. Yes, here on YouTube, I've gotten hundreds. I don't know, maybe even 1,000. It's so many comments about me looking like a character on Game of Thrones. And the irony is, I don't watch Game of Thrones. I do not have cable TV here at the house, nor do I watch TV, and I very rarely watch movies. And that's to make sure I have time for, all of this stuff. But I did look that dude up, and I think his name is Liam, right? Let me know in the comments below what his name is. But if I remember right, I think the dude is younger than me. So I think he looks like me. Yeah, he looks like me. Dar Shelton says, yeah. Can I have some of your old pedals? I've already used up my gear budget from watching your videos. Yeah, I've used up my budget from watching my gear videos too. Well, here's the deal. So I have purchased way more gear than I ever thought I would purchase in the last 5.5 years that I've had this YouTube channel. And some of the money, the revenue that I've made off of the YouTube channel, actually most of it, almost all of it, almost all of it has gone into buying gear and equipment upgrades, like the new computer. And by the way, thank you so much for supporting the channel. That's allowed me to upgrade my computer. But also, I do, as I think most of you probably know, I have received many pedals from pedal manufacturers who have reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you like a pedal? Would you like to," well, let me pick one up here. And no, this is not promotional. Here's a Walrus Audio pedal that I did recently. And honestly, Walrus, and this is just an example, right? Walrus Audio wrote me and said, "Hey, we got a pedal. Would you like to try it out?" And I said, "Sure. Heck yeah." Right? I'm a gear fiend or whatever. I'm a gearaholic. So of course I want to try out the pedal. And to be honest, A lot of the pedals that I've acquired over the last few years have been from interactions like that, where companies have contacted me and asked me if I'd like to have a demo unit of the pedal. And of course, we all know what that's about, right? They're hoping that I'll do a video and they'll get exposure to the pedal, right? That's the way the world works, right? And by the way, I want to let you know that when I do a demo of a pedal, it's only because I like the pedal. You know, really, I don't want to recommend anything to you all that I don't really like. So I only do pedal demos of stuff I like. But anyhow, back to the subject of whether I would give Dar Shelton any of my pedals. Well, Dar, I'm sure you're a nice person, but no, I'm not going to give you any of my pedals. Although I do have to say, I probably will be putting some of the pedals that I'm not using up for sale on eBay. I probably do need to thin the herd, so to speak. So there you have it, Q&A and a studio walkthrough. And hey, if you haven't checked out Chords of Orion long play right here, I invite you to check it out for extremely long musical pieces and videos. And as always, see all of you on the next video.